Part-Time Hitter is brought to you by Friendly Forces, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to helping reserve component members seamlessly integrate their military service with rewarding civilian careers. We connect them with employers who value their unique skills and critical role in national security and advise organizations how to become more reservist-friendly. Check them out at www.friendlyforces.org. Friendly Forces is also brought to you by the Fratty Guard, a lifestyle brand for part-time hitters. Check them out at www.thefrattyguard.com and on Instagram at @thefrattyguard. Welcome everybody to another episode of Part-Time Hitter. I'm your host, Eric Evans, and today I'm joined by Captain Kanwar Singh. Kanwar, my friend.
Kanwar.
Kanwar is a captain in the Massachusetts National Guard. He is a signal officer, and he's also the CEO of Skyline Nav AI. And I mean, you have like multiple jobs, man. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I'm like, wow, this is a busy dude. I don't know how some of you guys do this stuff. Thanks for coming on today, man. Really appreciate it. I have an initial question for you.
Sure.
You're a drone guy. Okay, sort of, right? You're in that space.
Yes, I am.
Are you tracking what's going on with like these drones in New Jersey, and like what the hell is going on? Do you have a take on that?
Well, all I've read is the media coverage on the stuff, and it's been going on for months at this point. It's not just New Jersey, but there were some drones flying overhead in Virginia and in parts of Florida, and I have no clue what's going on, right? And even if I did, I probably couldn't talk about it. But it's scary. I think it's very scary because there's certainly people who believe in UFOs and aliens and they think it's that, or there's others who think maybe there's some adversarial countries or groups spying on us. I just don't know. And I think some folks know, but maybe for security reasons or others reasons, they haven't been as forthcoming as they should have been. But I hope someone's, doing something about it because it does scare me.
Do you have like an educated guess on what it might be?
Well, I mean, it could be, some hobbyists that are doing things that they shouldn't be. That's number one. And if that's the case, well, then those folks are probably violating some of the air restrictions that are in place by the FAA, and they ought to be, prosecuted for that. Number two is perhaps there's a secret DoD program where they're testing their own drones, and they don't want people knowing about it or finding out, and so they're kind of doing that on their own.
Except that's
What's that?
sort of what I think it is. I think it's our own stuff, but like, why do it so overtly?
Yeah.
Where everyone can see what's going on and then say, "Oh, that's weird. We'll look into that. We don't know what it is, and it's not us."
Yeah. By the way, I think you'll appreciate this, Eric. I have to throw out the disclaimer, right? These are all my personal views. These are not the views of me, being a captain in the United States Army or the Massachusetts National Guard. We probably should have started with the disclaimer, but yeah.
Dude, I should do more of those for myself. I never put that out as a disclaimer. I'm still serving in the Army Reserve, and I never think to do that, but I think most of what I say is so stupid anyway that nobody cares. Yeah, man, it's easy to go down like the Reddit like UFO threads on what's happening with the drones, and like it's like very quickly you can be like, oh yeah, it's definitely aliens. Like that's the only possible explanation. But
I think number three is more likely, which is maybe there is some sort of adversarial actor out there that is spying on our sensitive national security infrastructure.
Well, if that was the case, wouldn't we have shot them down? Like, wouldn't that be a massive security thing that we would have to respond to immediately instead of just allowing it to happen for weeks on end?
Yeah, I mean, so based on the reporting I read, so when they spotted stuff in Virginia, I think legally, DoD is limited with what they can and cannot do, especially on U.S. soil. I think if this was happening on a foreign military installation, I think DoD will certainly have a lot more leeway and authorities to do this. But I think there were some legal arguments on why DoD cannot do something, on a U.S. soil, unless the president gives them a direct order to do something. Because you have local and state, laws on these things. And I remember when they sighted stuff in Virginia and they thought it was some adversarial country flying the drones that they were seeing. Well, I think they had to bring in local law enforcement to see if they could try to take it down. Even the installation commander did not have the authority from their standpoint.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
I know there's been some like one-offs, there's been some, we know, like, Chinese nationals arrested for like flying drones around random bases, but something at this scale for this extended period of time,
Yeah.
I don't think it's been seen. And they're saying they're big. They're like, big drones that are staying up there for a long time. So I don't know, man. It's interesting times we're living in. I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on that.
I would be rooting for aliens, by the way, because I'd love to meet some aliens during my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, if
So
they're here to eradicate us, then that's a different story. But
or maybe they want to, experience the human civilization. I'm an optimist, and so perhaps they want to hang out with us and go grab coffee at Starbucks. So yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think you're hedging your bets in case they are aliens and they listen to this. But one of the theories is that these aliens have been here a while, and that they only interfere to keep us from essentially destroying ourselves through nuclear war or some other sort of thing, basically to preserve the planet. So that's kind of a nice little, heartwarming theory, I suppose. That would be a good, probably best case scenario.
yeah,
So yeah, man, we'll see what happens, but we're tracking that pretty closely. But yeah, man. So obviously you're now a captain in the National Guard in the signal community. Yeah, walk me through that, man. How'd you get here? What was your commissioning scores? How'd you join? Like how'd you? It's always interesting to find out how people ended up in the Guard or Reserve.
yeah. Well, I'll go back a little over 10 years. So in 2014, early 2014, I had just moved to Boston and I started grad school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Senator John McCain came and spoke at my grad school. And I was certainly very inspired by him and his service to our nation in the Navy and him being a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And that inspired me, to see if I could do my part to serve our country and give back. I come from a long family history of military service. My grandfather, great grandfather, both served in the British infantry. And when I moved to the U.S., I certainly wanted to do the same and serve my adopted homeland, which is the United States. And then right around that time was also the first anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombings. And I knew that that was a very scary time for those people who were in Boston. And there were certainly a lot of ceremonies to commemorate that anniversary. And I attended that. And I knew that the National Guard had played a pivotal role in the immediate aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombings. So I was inspired by that and I wanted to serve. And so my first thing I did was I actually reached out to an Air National Guard recruiter and I said, hey, I want to serve. And the Air National Guard recruiter, we spoke on the phone and we had a great call. At the end of the call, I, asked him to send me more information so I could fill it out. And he did. And I submitted that. And then I also sent him another email saying, hey, by the way, just so you know, as an FYI, we haven't met in person, but I'm a practicing Sikh. I can't cut my hair or shave. It's against my religious beliefs. Would it be possible to get a religious accommodation so I could serve in the Air National Guard? Never heard back, by the way, from that guy. So I totally got ghosted. People get ghosted by their dates. I got ghosted by an Air National Guard recruiter.
Recruiters are like notoriously lazy. If you give them any extra work to do, in my experience, they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, on to the next guy. It's too much paperwork or something."
yeah, that's probably what happened. And he was probably a junior guy. So I ended up then reaching out to the Army National Guard. The Army National Guard recruiter couldn't have been totally different from the Air National Guard because he was very enthusiastic. And I told him and I met him in person, and he's like, listen, if you don't have any moral or religious concerns with picking up arms, then I'll do what I can to get you in. And I'm like, all right, let's make it happen. So I ended up going to the Boston MEPS in summer of 2014, and they had no idea what to do with me and how to process my application, and they would not allow me to enlist, even though I had scored the highest possible on the ASVAB. I met all the other requirements. So around that time, I also had the opportunity to tour the White House and meet with some members of Congress in DC, and I explained my case to them, and I was in touch
How'd you
with
get that opportunity?
well, it was through an organization called Sikh Coalition. They had a volunteer advocate academy program where they invited folks who were interested in public policy and advocacy to show up. And when I had applied for the program, I hadn't really told them about my desire to serve. But when I was in DC, I'm like, hey, I want to serve, and now I can't serve simply because of the way I look and my religious beliefs. They're like, all right, well, let's see if we can advocate for you. And it was
Wow.
just a great timing from that standpoint. So I remember sitting in the White House and I actually asked this question to senior White House officials. And I'm like, listen, I'm an American. I can't serve my country. What is going on? All of them said like, yeah, that's wrong. But no one gave me a definitive answer on how they were going to fix this issue. So I
Right.
remember being in the White House and said, listen, and I told some of my close friends there, I'm like, I don't know what it's going to take to fix this issue, but there are moments in life when you just know in your gut that you got to fix things around you because they're just wrong. And so I had that conviction while being in the White House, and I made that decision right then and there that it's going to be me. If no one else steps in, I'll do whatever I can because I just thought it was un American for our own government to come in and try to tell me, hey, I simply couldn't serve because of the way I look or my religious beliefs. And by the way, our own taxpayer money was being used, a country founded on religious freedoms, a country that lectures other countries on religious freedoms, not giving religious freedoms to our own troops. So it was a long journey, but I ended up working with congressional delegation from Massachusetts, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, and Representative Mike Capuano, who represented the area I was living in at the time in Somerville, Massachusetts. And then I also got in touch with Senator John McCain. So we had a bipartisan consensus on this. And along with other members of Congress too, by the way, from both parties, who basically wrote numerous letters on my behalf and behalf of other Sikh soldiers who were trying to enlist and serve. Why is that we can serve? And then they were asking the Pentagon, Secretary Ash Carter and senior Pentagon officials to comment on this, and none of them talked about it. And they all, got the letters, but they did nothing about it. So a year later, summer of 2015, after all this advocacy, they finally allowed me to enlist, which was shocking to me. So I show up Boston MEPS and I enlisted, but the catch was they could not give me a ship date for basic training. And
Why not?
they they're like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen with the religious accommodation. So they
Uh,
sort of put a placeholder date in my contract that it would be like a year later. It was just a made up date. So that's when officially the process started, where I requested religious accommodation. I put in a memo, and then it went up through my chain of command, and everyone in Massachusetts signed off on it. And then it went to a three-star general's desk, and he did nothing. Well, in December 2015, Secretary Ash Carter, who was the sitting Secretary of Defense at the time, came to my grad school, and I ended up meeting with him, and I ended up asking a question about my personal situation to him in front of 1,000 plus people who were in the room.
I love
And
it.
by the way, I was a specialist at the time in E4, enlisted, even though I hadn't gone to the basic training, but I was enlisted. And as you know, Eric, he was our boss. Probably like, there was
Right.
30 people between me and him. I didn't care. I'm like, what's the worst they'll do? They'll tell me
You.
no. There's actually videos online, I'm sure you can find it, of me standing there and being very nervous and asking him a question. And he actually was very supportive. In fact, after the event, he invited me backstage and I actually got a picture taken with him. And we took that picture and sent that to the three-star general who, like, hey, listen, the Secretary of Defense was very supportive about my desire to serve. What are you going to do about my religious accommodation request? Long story short, in April of 2016, I get pulled into a meeting with my commander. And in the meantime, by the way, I had been segregated from my unit in the Mass National Guard. I was not allowed to drill with my rest of the unit, but somehow they invited me to drill in April. And the commander asks me, hey, would you be willing to cut your hair and shave so we can send you to basic training? And by the way, I've been asked to ask you this directly by the three-star general at the Pentagon. And he was a captain, right? So imagine being a captain and getting a phone call from a three-star general,
Right.
it's kind of weird, right? And so I said, hey, sir, with all due respect, you're wearing your uniform, his OCPs, and I'm wearing my uniform, which is being a Sikh, and that's who I am, and that's what I look like. And my ancestors fought and died for centuries just so I could have the right to practice my faith freely. And as an American, the country founded on religious freedom, and someone being told, hey, you can't serve simply because of the way you look. I mean, that just was unconscionable and unfathomable to me. But I told him that, and I walked out. I saluted, I walked out. By that time, I had assembled a legal team, the same team that had invited me to DC 2 summers prior. And I told them what had happened, and they're like, hey, what are you doing on Tuesday? So this was on a Sunday. And on Tuesday, I showed up in New York City, and we ended up filing the lawsuit on Thursday. The case never went to trial. It was settled because the army backtracked and they issued me and two other Sikh soldiers interim religious accommodation. So I know that's a long answer, but I wanted to give you some context on this.
No, that's amazing, man. I had no idea that you were like integral basically in setting the foundation for trailblazing this essentially. I had no idea. That's amazing. But you know why they were so hesitant is because they
Hmm.
don't want to open that door to
Yeah.
then everyone else, which by the way they should, but It's like they know, oh, okay, if we do this now, what's this? And because it already happened, right? But and even looking actually, and I really want to hear about your basic training experience actually
Mm,
as a Sikh. But I'm seeing pictures now of drill sergeants with facial hair, and it's the most bizarre thing. So you would think
yeah,
of anyone in the army, those
yeah.
guys are going to be fit the image. But so it's things are changing, man. I think soon enough, so many people are going to have these exemptions. That's like doesn't make sense to make the
Yeah.
standard be clean shaving because so many people are exceptions already.
Well, if you think about all the modern militaries and all of our allies, they actually allow facial hair. You look at UK, you look at Canada, you look at Australia, New Zealand. Most of the NATO countries they allow men to keep facial hair. Now it has to be, groomed properly. So in my case, I've never cut my hair, I've never shaved, but I always put some gel on my beard. Right? That's what I do on the civilian side. That's what I do on the military side. It doesn't change for me. The only thing changes in my appearance is I can't wear colorful turbans in uniform, so I'm
You
restricted.
wear an OCP turban?
Yeah, yeah, camo and or black. Those are the only two colors I'm authorized. So the pink, wouldn't show up with uniform, obviously, that I'm wearing right now. So the arguments that the army was making when the lawsuit happened was, well, he won't be able to wear a gas mask.
Yeah,
So my legal team had already gotten some insight from folks who had served and were serving that the beard has no impact on modern day gas masks. So then they started making these other arguments, well, and kind of alluding to what you were mentioning. Well, it's he's going to stand out and it's going to impact esprit de corps and unit cohesion. Well, the military sadly used the same arguments to keep African American men out,
right.
from keeping Hispanic Americans out, from keeping women out from serving, from preventing our colleagues in the LGBTQ from serving in uniform. The world didn't fall apart when women enlisted. The world did not fall apart when President Truman integrated our military in 1948. So, and by the way, Sikhs had been serving in the US Army since 1918. There was actually a gentleman by the name of Bhagat Singh Thind who had enlisted and served in World War One in Europe as part of his unit. And Sikhs had been serving in all the wars, including the World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. It was only in 1980s when the Secretary of Defense at the time basically said no more religious accommodations. Everyone's going to look the same. And so the Sikhs who were serving by then had been grandfathered in and they were allowed to serve. But no new Sikh soldiers could serve with their articles of faith. Now, Congress passed a law a few years after that that allowed Jewish troops to continue serving with their articles of faith. But again, that was just for Jewish troops. That's
I
it.
mean, I know I've seen Jewish chaplains with beards. I was wondering
Yeah.
if that's a fairly new thing or that's been around.
That's been around, right? Again, Congress, rightfully so, said, hey, religious freedoms, but it was a very narrow religious freedoms for just Jewish troops. That was
Yeah,
it,
that alone seems you can't just pick and choose like that. You
right?
know what I mean? That's
Right.
interesting.
And so, and this is where, you actually see some of this contradiction happen within our government because Congress also passed a law in the 1990s, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA as it's known, that essentially said the government cannot violate sincerely held religious beliefs of anyone who's trying to do business with the government, which, by the way, included prisoners, included business owners, it included presumably troops. But up until really my case, in my situation, no one had really tried to use RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the law that Congress had passed, to request religious accommodation, which is what my lawyers ended up doing. So, by the way, I had some of the best lawyers on religious freedoms who were representing me, and it was a scary time at the time to file a lawsuit against the Department of Defense while you're serving.
Yeah, man. Good on you. Yeah, that would be scary to do. I'm surprised the ACLU or somebody like that didn't want a piece of a case like that. That seems right up their alley. So once you were able to actually join your unit, go to basic training, did you and since then have you run into any either sort of personnel issues because of the beard and the turban or even just like practical issues, not like the gas
Mm.
mask, but any sort of other thing that might pop up that we hadn't thought of?
Yeah. Not really. I do think that, my cadre at basic training and officer candidate school really wanted to be sure that I was there for the right reasons, and they might have picked on me a few additional times than, my fellow peers, but I welcomed that. I really didn't care, right? Because I'm like, hey, this is just more pull-ups and more push-ups and more low crawling, and it's making me stronger, and I'll do it all day long. In fact, there was one cadre who thought I was going to ring the bell during OCS. To answer your other question, I went through Officer Candidate School after basic training,
Did you do
and there was
state
this
OCS or
state. Yes, yeah.
okay? Oh, that's the tough one, man. Yeah,
18 months. I think we started with 35 candidates, and I think 17 of us commissioned. So,
yeah, it has an exceptionally high attrition rate because it's so long, and
yeah,
so I went through it too. And I don't know about you guys, but every month it's like they have to start over and remind you that you're still a candidate. So it's like day one of basic training every time because they don't see you throughout the month, so they have to like remind you that you're still a candidate every single month. So
that's
yeah, it's
right.
tough. It's tough.
Yeah, a lot of people quit, and it's kind of sad because I really wanted everyone to graduate and commission, but month three, month four were the hardest. So I remember, I think we were at 30 people, and then we were supposed to go for phase one in Connecticut, and I think 10 people just quit that one drill, and many of them were prior enlisted. One of
Yeah,
them had one of them had received like a bronze star for combat action in Iraq. We were all looking at each other like, hey, if this guy is quitting, what's going to happen to the rest of us? So we were kind of like paranoid about that.
those guys are actually because I noticed the same thing. They're kind of at a disadvantage because once you achieve some rank in the military, it's very hard to step back and then be treated like dirt again. Whereas if you're starting out as dirt, you're just used to
Yes,
being treated like dirt. So it's almost
yes.
easier that way than to come in as like an E5 or an E6 and then go through it.
That's what it was. I think the NCOs, the prior enlisted, really struggled through OCS, and most of us who were fresh off, basic training, because we were like, oh, whatever, this is all we've known.
Right.
We never got comfortable. I mean, now if I had to go back to OCS, I'm not sure if I'll have the same resilience that I did back then.
I've thought about it too, man. And even I would never admit this generally, but there were times when I thought about quitting, but
Yeah,
what kept me in was like I knew I was going to have to explain to so many people, oh, what happened? I thought you were like in OCS, or I thought you were an officer, and I have to say, well, no, I quit, and I didn't want to do that. That to me was worse than quitting, so I was able
that's
to
right.
stick it out. But yeah, my class started with like 30 something,
Yeah.
and my I graduated with two other people. So yeah,
Wow. Which
yeah,
state was this? Were you, and was it the federal OCS or
this was state OCS in Maryland.
Maryland?
Like you said, a lot of people quit during pre OCS because they're like, "Oh, this is awful. Screw that." And then yeah, you lose people throughout the year. It's a marathon, man, for sure. It's a slog.
It is. It is.
I always respect people more when I find out they've gone through the state OCS programs. It's just much harder to complete that, and I think it makes you a better like guard officer than just going to like 3 months of federal OCS and then all of a sudden you're a lieutenant versus like you understand the planning cycle of month to month and I think it creates better officers generally in the guard.
For sure. I mean, I definitely look at my time fondly. It wasn't fun in the moment, low crawling through our grounds there or having, glass in our hands and bleeding. But it's definitely, fun looking back because it's certainly one of the harder things I've done.
Would you ever consider going back as like a cadre member?
I've definitely thought about it, and there have been opportunities that have opened up from time to time. And I have a lot of respect, by the way, for drill sergeants and cadre because I don't think they have easy jobs. And I would do it, but as you know, we have some career milestones we have to hit and specific
Of course.
jobs we have to have from a key development standpoint, those KD assignments. And I'm not sure if it's going to happen for me, but maybe in the future. But I'll certainly look at those options and those positions in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of just like, broadening assignments where you can go and sort of take a knee, haze some candidates, enjoy yourself a little bit before you take on that next career step in the military. Have you found throughout your military career, how has it impacted your civilian career? Has it helped you?
Mm.
Has it hurt you? Both?
Yeah. One of my mentors in the military, once told me that we actually don't have a part-time career and a full-time career. We have, two careers, one on the civilian side and one on the military side. And I don't think it's actually easy to manage both. And typically, people who do what we do, which is, serve part time, either in the guard or reserves, and then, they have a full time job, they either succeed in one or the other. I haven't seen that many people who have had very successful military careers and also very successful civilian careers. unless their job is flexible, right? Like a lot of police officers, firefighters, many of them have government jobs where they have to get, as much time off that they need. That certainly is not the case on the private sector side. I'll
Right.
give you my current example. So I have a small company that I lead, Skyline Nav AI, and we have clients. I have employees. We are working on some very critical projects from a national security standpoint, and I do have DoDs actually as one of our bigger clients, along with commercial clients. And I can't just drop what I'm doing and just walk away and be like, hey, I'll be back in a year or 2 years.
Right.
When it comes to mobilizations and activations. And I've been very transparent about this with my chain of command. And I've basically said, hey, I'll take on roles that certainly, I mean, we could get activated at any point for state level mobilizations, right? But I've sort of had to opt out from additional mobilizations, because that'll directly impact the business, but it'll also impact DoD, because again, DoD is relying on what we are building
Well,
at
yeah, I'd
Skyline
say
Nav
like
AI.
that work is probably more important for DoD than you being at like some random training exercise or a hurricane response. Like, you know what I mean? It's probably more
Yeah.
important that you're there for Skyline than for, you know,
Well, I love my soldiers and airmen that I serve with. And so when I wear the uniform, I'm very focused on them and the mission needs. And I also think, my job at Skyline Nav AI is also important, because I work with some amazing professionals, and I have a small team, and they do all great work. And we have some fantastic clients who really, to your point, need our solution. It's a balancing act, it's a juggling act, right? But I try to do the best job I can. Am I perfect at it? Probably not. Sometimes I go days without checking my military email, and I get up in the middle of the night. I'm like, oh no, I haven't checked my military email. Let me just go jump in and see, make sure I haven't missed anything. Because as you know, right, we don't just work during the weekends, drill weekends, but we also have to work throughout the week. So yeah.
yeah, no, I'm the same way, man. There's times where I go, weeks, maybe months without checking my dot mail, and then I see all these critical communications I missed. I'm like, ooh. Oops. But yeah, man, it can be tough. That's why I founded Friendly Forces, which sort of helps
Yes.
people identify employers that sort of enable our service. Let me ask, so how many people do you have at Skyline Nav AI? How many people work for you?
Yeah. Well, it's a small team of 8 full-time people, and then we
Okay.
have additional 4 part-time folks. Yeah.
Okay. Are you hiring? When people are hiring, I always like to try and let the community know if we have any secret tech geniuses in the audience who are looking for work.
Yep, we are certainly hiring. So we are hiring software engineers, people with skill sets in computer vision and hardware development and embedded systems design.
So yeah, man. On that note, talk to me a little bit about Skyline AI
Mhm.
Nav, what it is and what it does exactly.
Well, I'll share a quick story. So 4 years ago, and you have to always remember history here, right? So I was rejected 16 times when I was trying to enlist in the army, and finally my enlistment came through, and I could commission as an officer, which I did in 2018. So I've been an officer over 6+ years at this point. And in summer of 2020, so when I was still a second lieutenant, I got a phone call from the Pentagon, and there was a colonel on the other side, and he said, "Hey, Lieutenant Singh, I need your help to commercialize some critical DoD technologies." And my first question to him was, "Sir, are you asking me or are you telling me? Because there's a difference." And his response was, "Well, you're a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. Go figure it out, Lieutenant." And I said, "Yes, sir. Moving, sir." Uh,
You said that'll be $500,000.
yeah.
You should have
So I ended up becoming part of this community that was working on defense tech and commercializing defense tech technologies. So for those of you who don't know, the DoD spends somewhere around 80 to 90 billion dollars a year on research and development, on things that, like internet and GPS and mRNA vaccines. These were all the results of DoD funding at some point in their life cycle. In fact, I have a slide that shows all the major components that are in our iPhone at some point or another were funded by DoD. Right? That's
said.
how massive DoD's R&D portfolio is. It's incredible. But most of these technologies never leave the labs that exist in the defense tech ecosystem. So we had been paired up with a capability that would be a GPS independent position and navigation capability. And being a signal officer in the Army side, I knew how vulnerable we are as a nation, as a military, to GPS and GPS denial. And so I knew this is a critical technology. Having lived in Boston for the past 10 plus years, I've struggled with GPS, especially in downtown areas where we have this urban canyon challenge. So if you're surrounded by buildings or you're in areas with concrete structures and jungle, well, you can't really get good satellite connectivity. And that's why you see big blue circle on Google Maps and Apple Maps, right? And so I knew this is a huge issue on the civilian side as well, and we ought to do something about it so we can fix it. So I ended up getting paired up with this technology that originated at the Army Research Lab. We ended up eventually licensing this technology, and now we are commercializing this technology for DoD and the private sector, right? So the beauty of this for taxpayers is if we succeed as a company, the DoD actually gets royalties of our technology from us as a company because they invested in this critical technology, and
Mhm.
then the DoD also gets the product that's commercially ready when they buy it from us. Because our team has been advancing this over the past 4 years. And now, certainly, it's further along and it's being purchased commercially. So it's more mature than when it was just sitting in the lab.
I'm always curious. So I was talking to somebody else recently who said like some random like admiral or something called him up from the Pentagon and said, "Hey, I heard about you. I need you to come help us like solve this problem." This colonel who called you, did you know him or did he just like somehow find you and
Hmm.
contact you?
Yeah, we had met in person through
Okay.
my career in the Army, and he'd actually come visit the Massachusetts area, and so I met up with him and just stayed in touch with him. And I mentioned my background in technology, but I didn't really think that would lead to anything. But I appreciated him reaching out to me because you and I will appreciate this, right? We do a lot of things for the flag. It's not always about the money, right? We enlisted, we signed the dotted line because we believe deeply in what America is and what America stands for, right? You and I can easily go work in Silicon Valley or work for large companies. I
I could be
did.
making $1 billion right now if I wanted to, but I
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Because, again, mission is more important.
Yeah.
And so when I got that phone call, I knew, hey, this is critical for national security. And if there's a colonel, calling me from DC, there must be a very important reason why he's doing that. And so I did that. Actually, for a number of years, I was working part time with the business while having a full time job on the civilian side and also having a part time Army career. So it was hard to juggle. But earlier this year, I decided to go full time on the business side because we were seeing some good advancements with our technology. We were getting good client interest. And I just knew that I couldn't juggle everything. You don't want to do everything half-assed, right? If you want to
Right.
do something, go do full ass. And so that's what I ended up doing. So now, I'm working full time for the business, and a big part of my job is meeting our existing clients, but also new clients who need our technology. The message I share with people is we are very vulnerable as a society, as a civilization, to GPS jamming, GPS denial. Not to have a shameless plug here for my company, but I do believe we have one of the best and innovative industry solution that solves for GPS denial and GPS jamming because you can use our technology to position and navigate without connecting to a satellite.
So would somebody like Google Maps be able to apply this to the iOS, the iPhone, and like because I've actually it's funny, it's really funny we're having this conversation. I've literally been thinking about this in recent days. If some sort of like massive EMP went off or critical infrastructure was affected, just being able to, because we're so reliant on GPS. Like, would I even know how to drive to work
Yeah.
without my GPS? Because I'm just used to like pulling up on my thing, and I don't really have to think. I just look at the thing. So, yeah, I think a lot of us would be screwed because we either don't know how or have forgotten how to read like maps. So, does your solution like do I have to download it onto my phone, or can it be implemented like at an enterprise level across
Yeah.
like a system?
Yeah, so our business model is certainly more B2B. Eric, if you ask anyone in your family how GPS works, probably they can't answer you, right? They'll just say, "Oh, I just open Google Maps and I get, or Apple Maps and I get the location, I put in the address and it gives me step by step by step." We do have a consumer-facing app, but it's more of a demonstrable product. In fact, people can go to our website, skylinenav.com, and explore our technology in action. They can actually explore the city of Chicago with no GPS. It leverages a camera. So we take pictures and we give you location back. That's what our tech does. And we do this by pre downloading satellite datasets. But our business model is
Hmm.
B2B. So we sell our software to other companies that are building cars, trucks, drones, aircraft, wherever you need a GPS independent solution. And as long as you have a camera, you can leverage our capability.
It sounds like timely technology. Just seeing how quickly cyber attacks can sort of cripple just the basic functions of our society. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to know that this type of tech is out there. Are do you guys have like, is anyone else doing this? Are there
Hmm.
competitors, or are you kind of the only ones in the space right now?
No, there's definitely competitors, which is a good thing, by the way. I welcome that because, in a capitalist country like ours, competition is good. You don't want monopolists and monopolies because that, I think, takes away the innovation. So we do have competitors, and so they may not have necessarily the exact technology or broad spectrum of technology like we do, but they have complementary technology solutions. And when it comes to replacing GPS, it won't just be one technology, by the way. It'll have to be a combination of technologies. So I'll give you an example. So our technology does not work at all over ocean. Why? Because everything looks the same. So
Hmm.
you can't just use a camera unless you're looking up, towards the stars and the sun. But looking at the horizon, unless you're approaching land in the middle of the ocean, we can't use cameras to tell you where you are. So that's where you'd have to use something like an inertial technology along with potentially magnetic or celestial or quantum chips. So there'll be a massive fusion of different technologies that can surface and function well end to end to replace GPS.
So, what's like the generic term for this technology? What would
Mhm.
you, what's the name for it?
Yeah, so the category is alternative position navigation and timing,
Okay. And so
APNT. Yeah,
at its highest level, it's an alternative to GPS that doesn't rely on like live satellite data, I suppose.
correct. That's right. That's right.
So it uses historical data to create.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. So is it like it's functional, it works, or you're still in the like testing design phase?
Yeah. No, actually, it's functional. In fact, I'd encourage you and the listeners to go to our website and you can play with our technology in action. So, we have an application programming interface and API that we have exposed publicly, and people can explore the city of Chicago with that API. So, Tuesday night, we published our demonstration of a drone flying with our software localizing that drone as it was flying. And so, this opens up a new avenue for customers to purchase our software and integrate this for drone based use cases.
How have you managed and kind of figured out the whole entrepreneur
Mm,
thing? So I really like entrepreneurs, and I encourage everybody to find a way to work for yourself instead of working for somebody else. It's much more enjoyable. It's a lot
mm,
of work. I don't think people realize how much work it is, but there's not really a crash course in being an entrepreneur. I mean, you can take an MBA, business classes, but how have you
mm.
figured out? Like, I wouldn't know how to run a company right now the way you are? Like, how do you learn how to do that? I don't know how to
Yeah.
get DoD contracts and do all that. So how have you like pulled that off?
Look, I do have an MBA, but I don't think my MBA prepared me for entrepreneurship because entrepreneurship is a totally different beast altogether. I do think having a network of other entrepreneurs and surrounding yourself with the right advisors, mentors is really helpful because you can get some really good guidance. In fact, right before this call, I was having a discussion with one of my closest mentors, and we were just walking through some of the challenges and some of the wins we've had recently, and just getting that objective, unbiased feedback as an outsider, as I was explaining things that we are experiencing right now. But I think the biggest thing is listening to your customers. So to the extent we've had some successes, that's because we've listened to what our customer needs are and trying to solve them with our technology, with our solution, with our platform. And I think entrepreneurs and just folks in business, if they can just be very close to customers. So I do spend a lot of my time traveling around the world and meeting different customers and prospects, getting a sense of what their needs are, and making sure that I'm there for them and our team is delivering on their needs when they do become a customer. That's what keeps you going, right? Because as a business owner, unless you have deep pockets, at some point you got to be managing the financials. You got to make sure you have more money coming in than the money that's going out. And we, by the way, haven't raised VC money, so it's not like I can just burn through millions of dollars of cash.
Well, and even
Yeah,
at the outset, oftentimes for a long time, you might not have more money coming in than is
right.
going out. It can take time to get to that point.
It does, especially if you're doing deep R&D and you're building innovative solutions. And by the way, you said this, Eric, but it's actually one of the hardest things I've ever done, which is running a company. especially when you have employees, because now you're responsible not just for yourself and the company, but your employees, your stakeholders, your clients. My family makes fun of me because I'm like constantly on calls. And it does, take time away from family. It does take time away from, vacations and hobbies, right? I certainly have a lot less free time now than I used to. When, let's say, if I was just, I had a job. So yeah, it
But
comes with trade-offs.
it's probably much easier to throw yourself into something that you care about and that's your company than it would if it was, someone else's thing and you were just working for them.
Totally, totally. Like I'll just give you an example from last night. I think I was up until 1 in the morning, and we had some proposals due, and I had to respond to some clients. And I don't know if I'd have the same motivation, right? Maybe I would have just gone to bed, be like, oh, I'll just do this in the morning. But
100%. Yeah. It's yeah, it's yeah, man. I think it has to be more than just like even just the money, but it's like this is a thing that I'm building and it's passionate about it, and
yeah.
because of that, it's work, but it's also more than just work. So
Right.
yeah,
I look at myself as a coach. So I have engineers and they're extremely smart, by the way, but when they're stuck, I'm there as a coach and helping them think through what are the issues and providing some guidance. And you're there for support for your team members, for your clients, for your customers, for your business partners. And I jump in. But the thing I love is it's more technically and also intellectually challenging to run your company because you're figuring out a lot of different things, your products, your sales, your pricing, your customer acquisition, your marketing, and so legal strategy, IP, patents. So every day is kind of different, which keeps it really exciting.
so do you have good people that are able to help you with that, or is it literally you as like the CEO trying to like figure all of that out, on your own?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can run and build a company on their own. I don't believe in this. It's a one-man company. It's actually a bad thing. But even if you look at companies that have been extremely successful, like Apple or Google or Amazon, yes, you've had strong founders or co-founders, but it was a team that enabled them to achieve greatness. And look, culture does matter, don't get me wrong. You look at companies that have been super successful and the ones that did not, they certainly, I think, had a different culture. AOL versus Google. AOL was a leader before Google came into the mix, but Google just had a much better product, much better and much cleaner and more innovative product. You look at Apple versus Nokia. Certainly Nokia was one of the leaders in the cell phone business, but Apple just crushed Nokia at their game. A big part of that was innovation and design and product and building the right products that customers wanted. So I think culture does matter, but I think it's a team, in my view, that accomplishes great results.
I think too, it's pretty important. I think, people who are in charge of stuff or who start companies, they tend to, I mean, I'm this way. I tend to think that I'm right about most things that I have an opinion on. Like we should do it
Mm,
this way. But turns out oftentimes I'm wrong. And sometimes you need somebody who says the
yes.
opposite of what you are or what you think to help you do something that you wouldn't otherwise have done if you hadn't brought them on to help you. So having those dissenting voices is I think super critical too.
100%, 100%. And I actually value that in our team is because, I'm going to ask controversial questions, or perhaps sometimes I'm too eager on some projects. And it's, surrounding yourself with people who can hold you accountable, but also knowing yourself what your limitations are and then becoming more knowledgeable about it over time. That does matter.
That's a big one, man. I've had people hold me back from doing some pretty stupid things when I was particularly animated about certain things, and they're like, "Don't do that. That's a bad idea. Let's calm down and we'll readdress it later." And then yeah, that so 100%. Yeah, we need these allies on our teams to help us through that. To close us out, I feel like I see you running a lot of like races and marathons. Are you a big runner?
I'm more of a rucker and marcher. I do run for the Army ACFT, but that's about it. I used to run more early on in my career, but
I feel
I
like I've
feel like
seen you run marathons or something on LinkedIn. Am I making that up, or is that somebody
no,
else?
it's true. I've done marathons. I've done the Boston Marathon. So we have a separate category each year where if you serve in the Army National Guard or Air National Guard in Massachusetts, you qualify if you have, decent PT scores and you can meet the fitness requirements, you can qualify and get a bib. And the catch is we can't run because we haven't competed officially on the running side. So you're allowed to walk it. And so I try to have a fast pace to the extent I can, although it gets challenging with boots and uniform on. But I love it. Boston Marathon is one of the big reasons I moved to Boston, especially the year after the bombing happened, right? And I knew how strong and resilient the people are in Boston. I don't realize how cold it gets. That was an
Yeah.
unpleasant surprise.
What time of year is it? Do they hold it in the winter?
Yeah, so the marathon each year is somewhere early to mid-April. It's on Patriots Day, and depending on which day Patriot Day falls. But yeah, it's typically between 12th to the 20th of April. So
So they let you guys like basically the ruck the marathon?
we walk it. We basically have our OCPs on and boots on,
Okay,
and
but
we
you're not with a ruck, are you? Okay.
after the bombings they stopped that. People
Uh,
would ruck, but for
yeah,
security reasons they're like no more rucks. So yeah.
interesting. Well, do you have any closing thoughts or closing sage advice for
Yeah.
anyone out there who may be listening, either about the military or religious freedom or about entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, joining the military is one of the best things I did because it has given me so many different perspectives and allowed me to meet with people that I would not have met otherwise. I mean, just, the ability to train with people from around the country or sometimes even around the world is quite a unique experience. And I don't think that training is available in any other organization in the US besides the military. So it's just been a phenomenal experience. I'm very grateful and privileged to have commissioned and serve as a captain now. And leading our men and women is one of the greatest experiences I've had. And I want to keep serving for as long as I can. I do encourage folks, to consider entrepreneurship. I do think it's amazing. It's risky, it's scary, but it's so much fun. When you're feeling successful and you're doing some of the coolest things that you would not have imagined you'd be doing before you started your company. And then finally, I think Eric, you're doing a fantastic job. This is really our first time connecting live, but I follow you on LinkedIn and I have a lot of respect for the work you're doing, highlighting, companies that are friendly for veterans. So yeah, keep doing that and just, grateful for the opportunity to be on this podcast. Thank you for that.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, I think this was a really great conversation. I had no idea some of the things that you had accomplished, and your whole story of being a Sikh joining the military is crazy. I think people will really enjoy that, and I really appreciate your time, man. And to the audience, stay part time.